This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome in. Happy May 7th, 2024, everybody. And we are live on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown for May 7th, 2024. It is going to be a fun episode tonight. In case you are wondering of everything that is going on with the FFPC right now, I would encourage you to go to myffpc.com and check everything out, including Empire Leagues, which is a fresh twist on our Dynasty Leagues. It's a progressive prize pot that happens every single year until one team wins 2 consecutive years, and then they get the entire Empire pot, and the league is disbanded. Everybody gets their deposits back, and you join another Empire League. We have our standard Dynasty Leagues going on at myffpc.com as well. Don't forget about the FFPC Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments that are going on right now. FFPC Best Ball Tournament, a $300,000 grand prize, and of course, a $100,000 grand prize for the very first time in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament. That's at myffpc.com, and you can do what many people are doing tonight in playing in the FantasyPros Championship, which you can win a $1 million grand prize over at myffpc.com. A ton of stuff going on there, so check it out. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. Let's get into tonight's episode, ladies and gentlemen. We are being joined by one of the, I don't know, she would probably not want me to say legend, but she was one of the few winners of the Apocalypse Draft about a half decade ago. She has put 14 other championships under her belt since then, and a woman who has been a force to be reckoned with, a woman that nobody wants to see in their drafts. You follow her on the X at Liz Ballard 09, and she is here to talk Fantasy Pros drafts and so much more with the FFPC tonight. It is Liz Ballard. Liz, welcome onto the show, man. Thank you so much for hopping aboard. Like, you've done the HSFF Hour before, but it is so good to have you on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown this week.
Well, thank you for having me. Really good to see you. How's everything going?
Everything's good. Obviously, we had I just said at the top of the show, we got a ton of stuff going on with the FFPC, more than we've ever had before. And I know you've been taking advantage of some of the FFPC drafts and the Fantasy Pros drafts as well. When did you start drafting this year, Liz?
I want to say late February, I think I got into my first draft.
And what is it about those early drafts that has, I think I know what you're going to say, but why do you like to draft that early in the season? Because a lot of people would say you should never draft that early, but I know a lot of high stakes players like yourself who's had some success at it that like to do it early.
Oh, you get some great deals. You get some players in the 12th, 14th round that will end up going in the 4th or 5th round later on. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but
it happens every year, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a ton of movement. I mean, Derrick Henry, I think he was going in the 6th or 7th round, I want to say, back in February, and so now he's barely making it out of the 2nd round.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to lead off with tonight with you, because he is going as running back 7 in the Fantasy Pros Championship at the moment. He is going at the 209 in the ADP in that championship, where everybody's drafting for $1 million. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are believing in Derrick Henry like they haven't believed in him since the 2,000-yard season days. Are you one of those players that is believing in Derrick Henry this year as well?
You know what? If he falls to me in the late 2nd, I'll take him. But I don't know, with Lamar Jackson being who he is, that just so many of those goal line situations could very easily get poached. So And he's getting a little bit older, but he's in a great situation. I don't know. I don't know. Yes and no. I sure liked him in the, the fourth, fifth, sixth round back, a couple months ago.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think he's got a lot of opportunity this year. So we'll see what happens.
So Liz, let me give you a hypothetical here. Let's say that you're looking at Derrick Henry. You're at the end of the second round. He goes at his ADP at 209. You don't get him. If you still wanted to draft a Ravens running back this year, is there anybody that stands out, or is it all just kind of whatever after Henry's gone?
Well, you got to like the opportunity that Keaton Mitchell gives you. I mean, I know he's coming off of a serious injury, but, he might be somebody who could win your league. You're not drafting to win the first four matches of the season. You're drafting hopefully to make it to the playoffs and to, make it to the big dance. And, you want the players, week 16, 17 that are going to be doing something. So, I think somebody like Keaton Mitchell could certainly be, he could be making some noise, when it's time to put up some points in the, week 15, 16.
I'm trying to look it up right now. So as far as the Ravens depth chart goes, Justice Hill still is there. I believe they drafted Rasheen Ali. He was not an undrafted free agent. And then obviously Keaton Mitchell backing him up there right now. If you look at the Fantasy Mojo on Keaton Mitchell in the Fantasy Pros Championship, and if you're playing in the FFPC, I would strongly encourage you to get a membership to FantasyMojo.com. Darren Armani is the webmaster there. He's the guy that runs everything. He's the godfather of the Pros versus Joes Championship, and he does a fantastic job putting everything together. So to Liz, Keaton Mitchell, running back 58 at the 1501. This has got to be a player that you're looking at a lot in the 14th and 15th rounds, given what you just said about him, right?
Oh, absolutely. If he's still available in the 14th, I'm probably, pouncing, depending on what else is available. But
right.
Yeah.
What let's keep it in the same division and talk about the Cleveland running back situation, Liz. Nick Chubb. So I have Nick Chubb in a couple of dynasty leagues, and obviously I was not thrilled to see how his 2023 season ended. But I had hope that the fact that it happened early, and I was like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be all right. And he obviously avoided a lot of pitfalls in the what could have been in the draft where Cleveland could have invested a second or a third round pick in a running back. They did not. I cannot remember a time, and Liz, maybe you'd be more equipped to answer this question than I would. Running back 32 is his ADP right now at the 811. As far as I remember, I don't think Nick Chubb has ever been that low in the Fantasy Pros Championship as long as he's been in the NFL right now. What kind of reaction have you had to the news coming out where it hasn't exactly been a glowing endorsement of Nick Chubb from Cleveland for week one at all, but it's pushed him really far down? How do we handle this as fantasy players?
We just stay quiet and we keep taking him at the 811. And because you know what, you're not taking him to be your RB1 week one. You're taking him to get into, game shape by say week 6, week 8. And, when hopefully Cleveland is making a push towards the playoffs, he is in game shape and he's going to get the bulk of the carries. And he's been, they're going to ease him back in. That was a brutal injury. I mean, just ugly injury. So, they're not going to put him out there week one and expect him to carry the load. So, RB 32, perfect. And, I'll take him in the 8th round, 9th round, every time he's available. I've got a ton of Nick Chubb.
So Liz, and you already mentioned this at the top. You're not drafting to win in September. You're not drafting to win in October. You're drafting to win, or at least putting yourself in position to win in December, right? Sure. And when we look at the Cleveland running back situation, Nick Chubb's a perfect example. You're not drafting him to win in September or October. You're drafting him to win in December. However, is there a Cleveland running back not named Nick Chubb that you would look at in the draft to help you through, September and October to get you to December? I'm looking at players like Jerome Ford, who is running back 40, who's going actually after Nick Chubb in this competition. Deontay Foreman, running back 73 in the 18th round. Have you looked at either of those running backs, or is it Chubb or bust if you're going with the Browns running back?
I think that, Jerome Ford is a decent pickup. I don't like handcuffing necessarily. So if I have Chubb, I'm not necessarily going to pick him up. I'm going to look for somebody else. So, but yeah, Jerome Ford, he did a pretty stellar job. He was solid last year, I would say, and he came pretty cheap too. So, I have no problems with a Jerome Ford. Who did Nyheim Hines? Did he end up with the Browns also?
That is a great question, and I think you might be right. And I'm going off the ADP right now in the FantasyPros Championship, and I can tell you that Hines is being drafted in the top 20 rounds on average, no matter what team he is on. So I'm going into the Google machine right now and looking this up myself. He is wearing number 22 for the Cleveland Browns this year. So that's a little bit of a monkey wrench too, right?
Absolutely. He's a good dart throw for like a best ball, like, a 28 round best ball, something like that. I don't think I would draft him in this, but if he was making some noise in camp or in the preseason, I might, pick him up as a sneaky, as a 20 round pick. But, he had a pretty brutal injury too. So, but he's had a longer recovery time too. So maybe.
Yes. And I think that's what we're all looking at. I mean, volume drafters are looking at this like, okay, yeah, a lot of Chubb, maybe some Hines, maybe some Ford. And you could pepper those guys in there, especially as you mentioned too, Liz. Best ball is a little bit different than the Fantasy Pros Championship. I want to shift to receivers now and talk about, I don't know, like I'm a Packers fan, but this is kind of one of the more exciting situations going on in the NFC North. It's the Chicago Bears. They drafted Caleb Williams first overall. They added Rome Odunze with the 9th overall pick, and that is a really talented trio of wide receivers there. But now, how do we make heads or tails out of this with fantasy? Right now, DJ Moore is going as wide receiver 16 at the end of the 3rd round. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 29 at the end of the 5th round. And Rome Odunze, wide receiver 40 at the end of the 7th round. Do you have a strong feeling on any of those 3 guys? If I were to ask you, which I'm going to right now, who is the correct Bears wide receiver to draft this year at those prices?
Maybe Keenan Allen. And then you've got Cole Kmet, who's going to be taking some targets as well. My fear was Chicago this year. Is it going to be a fool's gold situation the way Denver was a couple of years ago? I mean, remember how everybody was like, oh yeah, Russell Wilson, he's going to go to Denver, and everybody, Sutton and Judy and everybody is going to be top players. And, on paper, Chicago looks great, but are they going to actually be able to parlay that into some wins or into even some fantasy points? I don't know. I didn't think Justin Fields was a problem in Chicago. So I don't know. Have they fixed the problems there? I just don't know. But, I do like Keenan Allen for sure and Cole Kmet. And then you've got DeAndre Swift there too. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Lots of mouths to feed. But I don't, if they get their offense going, I don't think that you can lose with any of them, really.
So go ahead.
No, I'm thinking Keenan Allen is going to be a steady Eddie, no matter what color uniform he's wearing or who he's playing for. He's got great hands. I mean, and you put the ball anywhere near him, he's going to come down with it. So
that was sort of what I wanted to allude to, because I'm kind of with you where I like the prices of all 3 of these players. But you are leaning a little bit more towards, if I have to put you to one of these receivers, you lean to Keenan Allen at the end of the 5th round. I always say this is the Goldilocks conundrum, right? Like DJ Moore, oh, he's too early. Oh, Rome Odunze, he's too late. Oh, Keenan Allen at the 5th, yeah, he's just right. Is it the experience factor? Is it the fact that you have seen him do it for a longer period of time, much more so than DJ Moore, and obviously more than Odunze, given Odunze is a rookie? I think that's what we look to in a situation like this. Who's done it before? Liz, for you, it's Keenan Allen.
Absolutely. And he's coming off a great year last year. I mean, he was, I don't know what wide receiver he finished at, but he was top 5. I've got to say. I mean, he was just, nobody saw that coming, but can he repeat it? Who knows? I think a lot of these veteran wide receivers, they get paired up with a nice young quarterback, and they got something to prove. So hopefully he can repeat. We'll see.
Do you think there is a security blanket factor with Caleb Williams being a rookie in Keenan Allen? And I know you mentioned Cole Kmet a couple of times. Like, I almost feel like when some of these young receivers come into the league, they tend to zero in on these players, the comfort players, right? That they know are always going to be there. And to me, it's a high reception guy that Keenan Allen obviously fulfills. And then Cole Kmet, a tight end that it seems like quarterbacks want to dump off to, or at least young quarterbacks want to go dump off to. You like Keenan Allen. Sounds like you might like Cole Kmet a little bit as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it. Of those 5 players, when you're talking about Rome, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Kmet, DeAndre, I mean, who is a bad player?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 5 security blankets really to go to. So, if he can just get a little bit of time behind that line and be able to, find some open players, I think that Chicago should do pretty well this year.
Chicago should, and I'm kind of bullish on them. I think they're going to have a pretty good season, and it's exciting for us as fantasy players to be drafting some of these guys because the offense should be much better than what it was in 2023. I don't know if we can say the same for the New England Football Patriots. The receivers specifically, I'm looking at the ADPs specifically in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, Liz. Jalen Polk is the top wide receiver drafted from the Patriots on average at the 1506 wide receiver 72. Not far behind is Demario Douglas at the 1703 as wide receiver 76. Javon Baker, another rookie like Jalen Polk, wide receiver 78 at the 1705. Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 98, going basically as Mr. Irrelevant on average in the draft. That's 4 receivers. None of them are being taken prior to midway through the 15th round. Any one of these guys stand out to you more than the others? And if so, how much would you expect from that player this year?
I mean, I don't mind taking Demario Douglas in the 15th, 16th round, but I'm really not particularly bullish on the, Patriots offense this year. Maybe they'll surprise me, but, I know that they're probably going to be playing a good bit of catch up. So maybe there will be some garbage time points and that they might be putting up some points, just, 3rd, 4th quarter, just airing it out and getting lucky. But, I'm not, there's really nobody on that team that I'm just like, I've got to get that player. And not even Ramondre Stevenson. There's just really nobody that I'm like, oh, got to have him. I'm going to probably be passing on most of the Patriots players.
I think about Stevenson too. He was a guy that I kind of liked last year, given how cheap he was going. And then we saw what he put up. And now this year, it's just like I just see negative game script after negative game script after negative game script for Stevenson. He might be the most talented player on that offense. And I really don't want to have anything to do with them. And he's obviously being drafted much higher too. He's running back 21 at the end of the 6th round. But if you are drafting late in the Best Ball Tournament, in the Fantasy Pros Championship, and you are dead set on taking a piece of that Patriots passing game, you're going to go with the experience in Demario Douglas, right?
I am, and I'm going to hold my nose while I'm doing it.
Yeah, it happens in the 15th and 16th round that will happen from time to time. Let's talk about a guy who's much more exciting to talk about. I read a piece from Sports Illustrated earlier today listing 5 potential busts. This was not from a fantasy standpoint. This is just from an NFL standpoint. 5 potential busts in the NFC. And Malik Neighbors was actually listed as 3rd on this list. And part of the reason that this writer said Neighbors could be a bust is the fact Daniel Jones is throwing to him, and we've kind of been underwhelmed by Daniel Jones recently. I get that, but I understand Neighbors is super talented as well. So I'm still willing to draft him. And then I see his ADP at the end of the 3rd round. He's basically on that 3-4 turn, Liz. Wide receiver 18. How have you been handling him? Is he going to return that kind of draft capital for his fantasy production this season?
I don't think to start off with he won't. I think it's going to take him and Danny to get a while to get on the same page. Could be wrong, but yeah, I have to say that when the Giants took him, I was like, oh, like just what a crappy place for him to land. Like anywhere else would have been good, but I mean, I hope he does well. I mean, is Darren Waller still up in the air as to whether or not he's retiring?
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know.
So, that factors into it. But I mean, we had high hopes for Wan'Dale Robinson, and I mean, I know he got injured, but not a whole lot happened with him. I just, they're just not a high-powered offense, and with Barkley gone, I mean, he was the only piece of the offense that was really worth owning. So yeah, I'm just disappointed that that's where he landed, because I had taken him in a few early drafts, and then I was like, oh, that's.
But and I think this is what we're talking about. He was worth the risk. I mean, obviously, when you draft, and I've talked to a ton of people, yourself included, that talk about all the great draft values that you can get when you are building your teams early. But everybody will admit, like, yeah, there are some landmines that you'll step on from time to time, but usually the good outweighs the bad. And I look at the Giants offense right now. We just kind of talked about the Patriots as kind of like how we're kind of fading this offense. I look at the Giants right now. Honestly, it's not even close. The highest drafted Giants offensive player in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now is right now Malik Neighbors at the end of the third round. Then you get Devin Singletary in the 9th, Tyrone Tracy in the 14th, Darren Waller, obviously, like we just said, we don't know if he's going to play or not. He's going in the 16th round. Wan'Dale Robinson in the 18th, Daniel Jones and Jalen Hyatt in the 19th, and then Daniel Bellinger and Theo Johnson, the two tight ends there in the 20th round. Is this another offense, the Giants offense, sans Barkley, Liz, that we just don't want to be in business with again this season?
Pretty much. There's just nobody that excites me there, and I've been sort of fading Neighbors since he got drafted. Yeah. But you know what? They could surprise me, and they're another team that, game script could be that they're airing it out, third and fourth quarter, just playing catch up ball. So we'll see.
Yeah, Neighbors, I think like that's the one part. Like I stopped drafting players. I shouldn't say this. I slowed my roll on drafting players who I banked on garbage time because I feel like more often than not, it kind of let me down. Now, it still has happened before. And the Giants this year, I mean, you think about how good Philadelphia is. Washington has Jaden Daniels now. They should be much improved. And obviously, Dallas is going to get another year of Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And then that defense there, those Bills haven't come due yet in Dallas. They could be really good. There could be a lot of garbage time in the second halves for the Giants. And as long as Daniel Jones is competent enough, Neighbors could surprise for sure in as far as his stats go this season. We'll move it over to Green Bay and the NFC North. Jaden Reed, the rookie receiver last year, now the sophomore receiver, is being drafted as wide receiver 32. He's being drafted in the middle of the 6th round, Liz. That is the highest of any Green Bay wide receiver this year, higher than Dobbs, higher than Christian Watson. Is he still the wideout that you want to have at that price for the Packers this season?
Every time I'm taking him. If he falls to me in the 6th round, and I'm hitting the draft button. Absolutely. The way he and Jordan Love really kind of came together in the second half of the season last year. They finally got their just sort of got their act together, and love seeing it happen. And I think that they're only going to get better.
I think the other thing too is, and maybe I'll be proved wrong on this Christian Watson thing, but with the soft tissue injuries that he's had the last couple of years, and I know his dad, who's pretty outspoken on X, which is fine. But he's the only source I have seen saying that, oh yeah, they figured out what's going on with Watson, with my son's hamstrings, and there's already a plan in place. Hey, that's great. And I know Watson spent tens of thousands of dollars of his own money trying to figure this out. The Packers sent him to a specialist in Madison to try to figure this out. But as far as I can tell, the only public announcement that the hamstring thing or soft tissue thing has been solved has been from Watson's dad. And if that's true, hey, great. I love it. The Packers also did not draft a wide receiver at all in the 2024 draft. And maybe that's a ringing endorsement of Christian Watson, or Liz, like you were saying, could be a ringing endorsement of they found their wide receiver 1 out of Michigan State. It's Jaden Reed, and he's going to take a big step forward this year. Hopefully with Love and him not waiting until November to really get things clicking. They could be clicking on at September, and he could be a 90 catch guy this year, quite frankly.
Yeah, I like Jaden Reed a lot. I like that duo, and I just love seeing how they came together at the end of the year last year, and they really just they just hit the playoffs, just kind of all gears everything was working. And so if they can pick up where they left off, I think that they'll both be solid. And I love picking up Jordan Love,
Yeah.
He's going, 10th round, 9th, 10th round. I'm going to say love getting him there if I can.
Yeah, I do too. Quarterback 10, again, at that 9-10 turn. I mean, he's going, I'm going to bring up the quarterbacks here right now, just for my sake, so I know what I'm talking about here. Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray at the end of the 8th, middle of the 9th, then Jordan Love going at the beginning of the 10th, actually right before Caleb Williams, and then Jaden Daniels. So that's wild to see that. Yeah. Like once you have all these veteran quarterbacks off the board, it's either Love in the early 10th, or you're taking Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, or waiting until the end of the 11th to take a guy like Brock Purdy, or even the mid 12th for Justin Herbert, Liz. Mother of God, Justin Herbert is going in the mid 12th right now. Does that seem, I'm just seeing this right now, like at least for the first time I remember it. I know he doesn't have Williams and Allen anymore, but Herbert in the mid 12th, is that a bargain, or are you staying away?
Well, it is a bargain. I mean, how the mighty have fallen, I guess.
Yes.
Last year he was going in the 5th, 4th, 5th?
Yeah, 4th or 5th, yes.
Yeah, Tua is another one who's going, 12th round, 11th, 12th round. That's why I don't mind waiting on quarterback this year. If I don't get one of the top 3, I know that I can get a Herbert, Jared Goff, Tua, somebody, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. I can get one of them, later on if there's other players I want to get. But yeah, poor Justin Herbert. I hope he's not watching the show. His ego.
No, I think he's taking this week off. Normally he watches, but I think this show he's going to take a pass on. Thankfully that he can sit this one out. We won't tell him. We won't mention him on X later to watch it. To your point, Tagovailoa at 12-10. So he's going about a half round after Herbert. And then you get into the Kirk Cousins and the Trevor Lawrences of the world in the mid 13. Then Jared Goff in the 14th. And then a deep yawning chasm where we're waiting until the 17th round to take guys like Matthew Stafford, Deshaun Watson, and Aaron Rodgers as well. Rodgers is another interesting guy at the 17-12 too. We'll see what happens there. Where was he going, Liz, last year? Like 8th round, something like that? 9th round?
I'm guessing about 8th round. Oh, God, that offense had so much promise.
Mm-hmm.
But
what's changed? I mean, really? Like what's changed for like the offensive line's gotten better? Breece Hall is 1 year recovered from his ACL. To me, Rodgers, as much as it pains me to say it, I love Rodgers there as a backup in the 17th round.
Right. Yeah, we'll see what they can do. I mean, has their offensive line improved that much? I mean, I haven't really been paying all that much attention to the Jets, but I mean, one of the reasons why Aaron Rodgers got hurt in the first place is because he was being chased by
yes.
He didn't have a second to get set and throw the ball. So, Zach Wilson was not going to have much of an opportunity. I mean, maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit more nimble, but I mean, none of those quarterbacks had a shot at, and the running game was tough to get established because the offensive line was just horrendous. So, I mean, is it better this year?
Well, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? Because if you ask the Jets, if you ask, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're totally better." But if you look at it, let's just look at it real quickly on the surface, because I know offensive line, who cares? But Tyron Smith, they got to play left tackle from the Cowboys. They signed him as a free agent. They also drafted, and I'm trying to figure this out here. Let's see here. They drafted, I take that back. Joe Tippmann they got in the draft last year. So he is another year older. I thought, Liz, they drafted some, the guy out of Penn State, Olu Fashanu.
Right.
Who is going to be a tackle for them. They drafted him in the first round this year. So again, if you were a believer that Tyron Smith still has stuff left in the tank, if you're a believer that Olu Fashanu can contribute year one, yes, the offensive line is better. If you are skeptical about that, which I think a lot of people are, maybe the offensive line isn't all that better. And Rodgers, God willing, that Achilles holds up because he might be running for his life again. I think that's second straight year. Jets are going to be fascinating to watch in the preseason to see how this thing goes. Okay.
I've always said that I'd rather have a great offensive line with a mediocre quarterback than, a great quarterback and a mediocre offensive line. I mean, I think you can do a lot with an okay quarterback, but if your offensive line is porous or sucks, I mean, yeah. So, offensive line isn't the sexiest, position group, I suppose, but boy, they are where the game is decided, where the offense is decided, and I never overlook that group. They're, that's where the game's decided
in the trenches. In the trenches.
Pretty much.
Rodgers, too. I mean, he's a generational talent, and it certainly wouldn't take anything away from him. But I will say that for most of those years that he was in Green Bay, the offensive line was always one of the better ones in the league. For a few years, it was probably top 5. For many years, it was top 10. And almost the entire time, it was always top 15. And when you have an offensive line like that in front of you, it does allow a player like him to extend the play, to kind of, improvise. And he made a lot of great plays extending the play and improvising. Part of that has to do with the offensive line, maybe a huge chunk of that with the offensive line. Keep it in the AFC. Let's talk about A.D. Mitchell here. He gets drafted in the second round by the Indianapolis Colts. I had the opportunity to draft him in a dynasty league in the mid-second round. It was him or Xavier Legette. And I took Xavier Legette. Part of the reason was because, first of all, I don't like Xavier Legette. I'm 44 years old. I don't know if Xavier Legette is younger or older than me. I could be, either way. He could be pushing 50 for all I know. So I didn't like his age, Liz. But I took him because I saw an opportunity for him to be the number 1 receiver in Carolina. I don't see that opportunity for Adonai Mitchell in Indianapolis because of the Michael Pittman contract extension and given what he's already produced on the field. We love Michael Pittman there. I think what this comes down to, this Mitchell pick, this isn't necessarily a question about him, but what does this do for Josh Downs? Because this is not, at least I don't think it's going to be a pass-heavy offense. You have Anthony Richardson, who is a weapon with his legs. You have Jonathan Taylor, who has already led the NFL in rushing once. I look at A.D. Mitchell and Josh Downs. I'm kind of down on both of them. If you wanted to take one later on in the Fantasy Pros Championship, would it be Mitchell? Would it be Downs? How do you see these two guys' seasons going this season?
I don't know, honestly. That is, I have taken both. I was taking a bunch of Downs before Mitchell was drafted, and now I've switched up to Mitchell. I really think that could be a pretty explosive offense, and I think that either one of them could be getting a lot of balls thrown their way, and Pittman too. I mean, I think that, the top cornerbacks are going to be focusing on Pittman. So I think those guys are going to get their opportunities. And a healthy Richardson, I would say they could be a very sneaky team to put up some points for sure.
I think about that division too. I mean, Mike Vrabel no longer coaching the Tennessee Titans, and it seems like the Titans have put a huge emphasis on offense, not only with their head coach and Brian Callahan, who is a former OC in Cincinnati, but the addition of Calvin Ridley. And then today we saw the addition of Tyler Boyd. They still have Hopkins. They still have Burks on that team as well. Anthony Richardson, quarterback 6. Maybe he sneaks up a little bit in Fantasy Pros drafts too. If he's healthy, we saw that was the other thing, Liz. We saw last year, the first couple of weeks, we all were excited about the athlete and what he could do with his legs. He showed off his arm pretty good, not just with bombs, but precision passing, and he was getting it done on intermediate routes too. Very, very excited to see Anthony Richardson this year. Again, as long as he's healthy, which he should start the season as that, quarterback 6 in the mid-7th round. Yeah, kind of with you. Now that I think about it, maybe it is going to be an explosive offense this year, especially in that division. Tight ends. Travis Kelce is what I want to bring up next. For the first time in, I feel like I'm doing Frozen. Is that Frozen? For the first time in forever? I don't know. But Kelce, tight end 2, Liz, no longer tight end 1 as far as the ADP. 206 is where he is going in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts. He is going behind, I believe, Sam Laporta, right? Yeah, Laporta is the tight end 1 at the 201. Kelce at the 206. Trey McBride at the 209. Kelce, is he now a value? I know he's getting older. Is he now a value for FFPC players in that mid-second round?
Absolutely. Mahomes loves him. I just can't think of a better tight end to be able to grab at the mid late second round. Like, I will take that every time it's available. I will take Kelsey. Love that value. Absolutely. I mean, Mahomes is going to have more people to throw to this year. But still, Kelsey is his go-to guy. How long have they been on the same team together? 5 years now?
At least, yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's like an old pair of shoes for Mahomes. He knows where Kelsey's going to be. It's like those two are so intuitive as to what they're going to be doing. I just, love that. And especially in the tight end premium leagues. Like, getting Kelsey third tight end off the board, I will take that every draft.
Liz, the last 2 years, and especially last year, we saw how, I don't want to say how important the Mahomes Kelsey stack was, but we saw how many people were trying to utilize it, getting Kelsey and then adding Mahomes later. That stack's never been cheaper now either. Kelsey at the 206, I just looked it up. Patrick Mahomes, quarterback 3 at the 505. Given that you are trying to beat out, thousands of teams in the FantasyPros Championship for $1 million, how important is it for you to get that Mahomes Kelsey stack this year, given that this is the lowest price it's been in several years?
It's not crucial. I mean, if it's there, I'll take it, but I'm not going to reach for it. I don't mind waiting a little bit on quarterbacks this year. If I don't get Mahomes, if I don't get Allen or Jackson, I'm okay with that. I don't mind waiting until one of the later rounds and trying to get if I can pair Goff with Laporta, I'm fine.
Yeah.
That works for me. We had a lot of did we have a lot of quarterbacks? We had some quarterbacks get injured that I spent like a high pick on. Was it a high pick? I guess Fields. I had a lot of Fields last year, and that hurt.
It stunk because it worked for a few weeks. Like, you could see how it was working, and then just for whatever reason, it didn't, like, long term, it didn't work. We'll use Laporte as an example. When you draft a player like that, where he goes, first, second, third round, whatever, and we could talk about receivers in that same scenario too. When you draft a player like that, excuse me, are you making a note on your cheat sheet? Like, okay, let's look at Jared Goff here in the 14th or the 15th or whatever. If you draft another player, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Puka Nacua, wide receiver 6 at the 111. Are you making a note to maybe grab Stafford as a backup in the 17th round? How important is that? Like, obviously, it's something that you value to a certain extent. Do you value it to the point where you're making a note of it to keep it in your mind for later?
I might look at the draft board towards the end of the draft and say, who can I pair it with? But not necessarily. And some of these, I'll go with just one quarterback and see how things shake out, especially with these early drafts. So much is going to change in the next 4 months, 5 months. I mean, people are going to get injured. That they're going to be breakout players. People are going to, all of a sudden, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Wilson? Is it going to be Fields? So, I don't mind waiting on quarterbacks, at this time of the year.
I do like the idea too of just drafting one quarterback, and then if you need to add, especially since you only have to start one on the FantasyPros Championship, you draft one quarterback, and then you can look at it later in the season, and there is that preseason waiver wire, right? So you can always add somebody there if anything happens to your quarterback. I know that was a big thing with the Hurricane a few years ago with the Buccaneers. I think it was Buccaneers and Saints or something. That game got postponed, and then some people who only drafted one quarterback and didn't grab somebody in the waiver wire were stuck without a quarterback if Jameis Winston was their only quarterback. So that is important, and I think that is using your draft capital wisely for sure. One more tight end question here, Liz. Excuse me. Brock Bowers gets drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders in the mid-first round of the NFL draft this year. That obviously has, I don't want to say killed Michael Mayer's value, but it's obviously torpedoed it to an extent. He is now going as tight end 26 at the mid to late 16th round. Do you have any interest in Mayer this season? I know he should take a step forward this year, but Brock Bowers might prevent him in doing so.
Well, I had Mike Mayer on just about every team prior to Brock getting drafted. Yeah, I really loved him in the 10th round, and now I can get him in the 16th. So, yay, early drafting. That's where it backfires on you. But, they could end up having a situation out in Las Vegas where they utilize the two tight end sets. And, yeah, I know that Meyer will probably be more of a blocking tight end, but, you could have a Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez situation, hopefully without any of the off-field stuff. But, I mean, think of how well the Patriots utilized Gronkowski and Hernandez during those couple of seasons where they were both, viable tight ends to own in that New England offense. So I don't know. I guess that's the best hope for it, for Michael Meyer. It was definitely a bummer when Brock got drafted. I was like, oh, that was another one. Man.
Yes. In regards to Meyer, like when I don't know how you handle your roster construction with tight ends in these drafts. Is Meyer a guy you only look at now if you drafted like an elite tight end, like a Laporta, Kelsey, Andrews, McBride, one of those guys, and draft Meyer as a backup? Or maybe you wait on tight end and you draft like, Goddard and Schultz, or maybe you draft Hawkinson or something like that, and you need somebody else and you grab Michael Meyer. How do you handle Michael Meyer in a 20-round managed draft that you're doing here in May, Liz?
I might pass on him now. I've kind of gotten cool on him, and I'm letting other people take him instead. The guy who I am picking up now in the late drafts is Mike Gesicki. He is the tight end that I'm liking to pick up right now. So you can get him 17th, 18th, 19th round. So I don't know. He's always had so much promise and has just never been able to find a team that will throw him the football. So we know that Cincinnati likes their tight ends, so maybe he can start getting the ball thrown his way. I don't know.
Couple of things with Gesicki too is the Bengals did draft Eric All from Iowa, which is like the tight end factory. But All is a rookie, and we know, with the exception of a few guys last year, most of the time rookie tight ends not all that great. And second of all, Eric All had a lot of injuries throughout his time in Iowa. I was actually doing a show with Thor Nystrom from Fantasy Pros last week, and he said the only thing that's really going to keep Eric All from succeeding in Cincinnati is Eric All's body, And so we're talking about a guy with a lot of injury issues and a rookie. Well, if he's not going to get it done, who is? Well, lo and behold, Mike Gesicki is being drafted as tight end 32 in the 18th round. That is very, very good. Alex P. Keaton already chiming in here, Liz, on the YouTube chat, telling you to shush because you are giving away secrets on Mike Gesicki right now, which is something. I mean, this is why we have people like you on, very successful players who know what they're doing, and we love the Gesicki call. To compound that, you've already given us him. Is there another player, maybe somebody that you're not, maybe not in the later rounds, maybe in the mid rounds, maybe in the early rounds? Is there another player that you're trying to get on all your teams this year, Liz? And then a player that you don't want to have anything to do with this season?
I do like getting. I like Austin Eckler's where he's going right now. What his role is going to be, I don't know. I like getting him. I love getting Nick Chubb.
Mm-hmm.
Who else is somebody? Joe Mixon. I love Houston. Houston this year is going to be like. That's a team that any piece of their offense I can get, I will take. So yeah, I like Joe Mixon. Who don't I like? I'm gonna say that I am not taking anybody. Like I'm not saying I don't have a do not draft. I'm not taking Garrett Wilson in the first round or even in the second round, and so he's usually gone by the time if he. I let somebody else take it. I'm too leery of the Jets this year, and he's too expensive for what he's working with. Now that means it'll probably go off this year, so everybody draft with confidence now. So Yeah, I've in years past, I've been like, I'm not drafting that guy. And then, then they go off and it's like, you just
Right.
need to, I'm thinking that everybody certainly has an opportunity to land on one of my rosters. It's just a matter of at what round I'm willing to draft them. I'm trying not to reach as much this year. Who have I been reaching for? I think I've been trying to stay pretty disciplined, and I've been setting up my quay, and then sometimes I'll just like walk away from it and be like, no, just let the computer auto draft
Yes,
it.
exactly. All about AI at that point. You say you're trying not to reach as much this year. Did you find yourself that getting you into bad situations in drafts last season?
Yeah, who did I reach on a lot last year? I took Fields in just like every draft, and I was taking him about a round earlier than anyone else. Pacheco was another one that I reached on, but he ended up being, he worked out pretty well for me, but still, I could have played my cards a little bit better. There were some players that I just had zero exposure to that really hurt me. Kyron Williams being one of them. I was very slow on the Puka news. Like, he went undrafted in just about every early draft. And I was like, he had one good showing. He was just a flash in the pan. And so I missed out on him. So, I make some bad judgment calls, and, I'm so right now I'm just trying not to like say I'm not taking this person or I have to get this person. It's just going to be, play the board, just let the players get drafted and see who's available. And you've got a list of who you want and, don't do anything crazy.
Regarding the Houston offense that you talked about, you said you wanted any piece of them. I just looked at it right now. So Cade Stover, the rookie tight end, he's going late in the 19th round. Damian Pierce, again, 16th round, whatever. Dalton Schultz, tight end 14 at the 8-12. Tank Dell has fallen to the 607 at wide receiver 33. CJ Stroud, quarterback 5. Joe Mixon, as you mentioned, running back 15 at the end of the 4th round. I could definitely get on board for that. But the two players I wanted to ask you about, their ADP has almost, as of a couple of weeks ago, like 2.5, sometimes 3 rounds are separating these guys. They're almost back-to-back right now, Liz, and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. Collins at wide receiver 15, Diggs at wide receiver 17, with an ADP for each of them at the 310 and the 312. Do you have a preference there? If you're drafting at the back end of the 3rd round and they're both available, who would you rather have at that point, Diggs or Collins?
I don't know.
Or let me frame it like this. Since you're a volume drafter, are you trying to split your shares of those guys equally?
Yeah, and I already have a good bit of Nico Collins, so I would probably lean towards Diggs. And I mean, if I was at the turn, geez, I might take them both.
Ooh, yeah.
Kind of crazy. And then you got to take Stroud later on.
Which you obviously easily could do. I mean, Collins and Diggs at that 3-4 turn, and then Stroud not going until the 607. So you definitely could pull off that Houston Texans stack if you wanted to. Let's couple of questions here. Thomas Glaze is watching us on Facebook tonight. Liz, longtime FFPC player. Where's Dallas Goedert going to fall in the tight end rankings with all the mouths to feed in Philadelphia? If you look at the ADP for tight ends right now, specifically with Goddard, he's kind of going as a borderline starting tight end 12 at the 710, basically the same ADP as TJ Hawkinson. He's going roughly a round after Jake Ferguson. He's going about a round before Dalton Schultz. Is that where you have Goddard at about tight end 12, tight end 13?
Yeah, he's going right before Schultz and right after Njoku and Bowers and Ferguson. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that he's going to be he's a good one to pick up if you pass on, the elite tight ends. He's a nice one to pick up, but then you got to pair him with, with a Freiermuth or a Komet, and there's a few others, maybe an Isaiah Likely. Yeah, you've got to pick up some other players afterwards. And I wouldn't go with just 2 tight ends if Goddard was my first tight end pick. I would probably go with 3 or 4. And Stover, he's an interesting one. He is a very interesting. I want to say that I'm not sure where he is going right
Stover's super late. Stover right now in FFPC Fantasy Pros ADP, tight end 36 at the 19-20 turn. So he's basically the second to last or final round pick.
He could be somebody who comes on right about the, week 7, 8 and becomes a regular contributor.
And that's the other thing too, is if you draft Goddard and then you take another tight end right away, you could get a guy like Cade Stover in the 19th, 20th, or you get your guy Mike Gesicki too, coming up as your third tight end as well. One more question for you, Liz. Mile High Luke in the YouTube chat wants to know your take on the Chicago Bears backfield with DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, and Khalil Herbert all there. You kind of mentioned Swift a little bit before, but obviously the ADPs for these guys are much different. Like the price you're going to pay for Swift is going to be much higher. I'm going to bring them up right now. According to Fantasy Mojo, DeAndre Swift, running back 20. He's in the mid 6th. Roschon Johnson, running back 56 in the mid 14th. Khalil Herbert about a round behind him, running back 59 in the mid 15th. So knowing those are the prices you're paying, what's your take on those three running backs?
I think Swift is going to be the guy. So I would probably, I would go with Roschon or Herbert. If I was doing like a 0 RB build, then I would, certainly take somebody like that. But I don't know. I get a little bit nervous with the 0 RBs. So I would, Swift would be the guy that I would want to have.
Why do you get nervous with the 0 RB? Just curious.
Because then if you end up getting stuck with, just a bunch of second and third string, players, if you go hero RB and then you're running, your main running back goes down, then, you've got to really hope that the stars align with some of the, your later round picks. So.
Right. Okay. And that makes perfect sense too. I know there's pushback. There's been pushback on 0 RB for years, but I think it's a little bit louder, at least as we stand May 7th here, 2024, for sure. As we stand here today, we learned a lot from Liz Ballard, the 15-time FFPC League champion. Follow her on the X, Liz Ballard 09. Liz, congratulations on all your fantasy success so far this season and in previous seasons. Good luck the rest of the way this season, and hopefully you're bringing down maybe even a pair of $1 million grand prizes this year at the FFPC. Thanks for enlightening us, entertaining us, informing us tonight. I know I appreciate it, and definitely the viewers did too.
Thank you so much for having me. Always good to talk with you guys.
Absolutely, Liz. Be good. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
That is Liz Ballard, ladies and gentlemen, the 15-time FFPC League champion, joining us here on this month's edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. I want to thank her. I want to thank the FFPC for making this possible. I want to remind, and for each and every one of you, either listening to this later or watching it live, we certainly appreciate it. I want to remind you that Empire Leagues are live at the FFPC, the Progressive Dynasty Leagues that you want to check out, where half the prize is set aside each and every year, and then once somebody wins 2 years in a row, boom, they get the Empire pot and that year's grand prize as well. The league disbands, you get your deposits back, and you're free to join another Empire League. They've been very popular so far, so check them out at myffpc.com if you want to add on some Dynasty Leagues as well. Hey, we got a lot of those going on as well. From $100 all the way up to $5,000, myffpc.com is where to go for that. Check out the Best Ball Tournament and the Superflex Best Ball Tournament. Both of them, six-figure grand prizes. The former, $300,000. The latter, $100,000 grand prize. It is a fantastic prize pool this year. It's the biggest one ever. myffpc.com is where to go for that. We gave you a lot of information on the Fantasy Pros Championship, so check that out, myffpc.com as well, and you could become the next FFPC millionaire. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on it, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, get notified each and every time we go live. We will be going live this Thursday at 7 p.m. for 2 full hours on the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Be myself and Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport talking about the fallout from the NFL draft and what you need to be doing in your FFPC and Fantasy Pros Championship drafts. And there's a chance, fingers crossed, we could be covering the NFL schedule release that night as well. Not saying it's going to happen. Could be out before then, could be out after. But if it is happening that night, we'll be breaking that down live. So you'll get instant fantasy analysis on the schedule release when you watch over at the FFPC YouTube channel or bettersports.com, Better Sports Network YouTube channels as well. Friday night, Farrell Elliott and I will go live at 10 p.m. Eastern time with the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour for a full hour to get you set for your weekend. And then we'll be doing the whole thing again next Thursday on the HSFF show on Thursday night at 7 p.m. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. For Liz Ballard, I'm Eric Balkman. We'll talk with you again real soon. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.